I did not realize that Brandon's sock cap was a sock cap, and I was like, "Is that a scarf? Is that a do-rag?" Derek's with me, so we have quorum.
Yeah, fine.
I got a Tim.
What's up, Tim?
So Tim and I are in Palo Alto to do VMware orientation. We are getting oriented. They had a session on what a VM is.
You guys gonna get your vCloud Air certifications?
You know, vCloud Air is no longer a thing, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think this is a company figured something out there.
I'll be sure to use that in 0 ways.
vCloud Air, I think, was the effort to create a public cloud, and that's a hard game.
So is Cloud Stack?
Is that?
Go ahead, Clayton.
I would say, is that Cloud Stack?
I think there were like 12 of them.
I think they renamed it to vCloud Pro.
I'm not going to make comments about what is it called now or something. So the reminders for Outlook are just awful. They just pop up and they keep popping up and they don't go away.
If you have multiple windows open against anything else, then all of a sudden you'll be denial of service attacked by reminders.
So we, when Rackspace was using Outlook, we would use Firefox or like a different browser for Outlook Web, and then mute notifications from that app completely.
Yeah.
Just like I'm dedicated to that one.
Who's the driver today?
I don't know.
I think we have quorum. We could probably get started.
We don't have any agenda topics.
We have
So-
the, we need it? No. Okay. We have the dashboard. So I took a look through that past couple of days, figured out a couple of obvious things, but there are actually a bunch of things open. So there are
In the dashboard, you mean the
projects.
the project page for steering committee. Okay. Do we want to run off of that? Then
Yeah. So there are a few charters still in flight. I guess the contributor experience one merged this week. Phil is looking at the SIG docs charter again, which was created around, I think, just before KubeCon.
Yeah.
So resuming there, I think the big open issues charter-wise are SIG Big Data and whether we should make that into a working group instead. That was deferred until post-KubeCon, and now it's post-KubeCon. They're, chatting with the folks I know from SIG Big Data. They're not, I don't think they really care one way or another. They probably just want
the only parent SIG question was whether or not they should live underneath SIG apps. I think that makes sense to me, but I don't know if other people have thoughts.
Yeah, that's the way it was originally, more or less.
I mean, my interpretation from reading through the thread is the one person essentially wants something long running, and the working group's not really the fit either. Like, what's the thought on
Yeah.
working?
Yeah, so the other thought I had is we had this discussion about birds of a feather groups, BOFs, or other kinds of unofficial groups,
Right.
or user groups, and this really seems to fit that really. I mean, it's stuff that is never going to be in Kubernetes, and it's really a use case. So we've been really inconsistent about forming working groups. There have been working groups in some things that are kind of in that category, and in other cases, the working group proposals have been rejected. SIG Big Data predates the formalization of working groups. And it was a SIG a really long time ago, and then it was dormant for a while, and then it was resurrected as a SIG. And we could just leave it because it's not creating, the main trouble it creates is it dilutes the understanding of what SIGs are and what working groups are. And then we end up having these long discussions on a case-by-case basis. So, but yeah, it doesn't really fit with the normal SIG governance because they don't have code. I don't know if they do community updates on a regular basis. I mean, really, they just need a discussion forum.
Yeah, another way to push it off would just be have them form like CNCF working group, big data or something.
Well, yeah, so that's an active topic of discussion, CNCF, creating SIGs and working groups there.
Yeah.
So that might actually make sense. I don't know how quickly that will be going.
So, I mean, another option here would be something along the lines of we say, hey, you guys are a support group or a user group. We put those things in sigs.yaml and or equivalent, and point to mailing lists and discuss and say, hey, look, and then it's like, to form one of those, it's just got to be something that's centered around Kubernetes, so it can't be any random thing, but like the bar there would be low.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of that. There have been demand for that in other areas like developer tools and CI/CD and other types of applications. I mean, even machine learning. There's a working group for machine learning, right? But it's very similar to this. The only difference is there is some like GPU support or something like that they might actually want to get into Kubernetes. Edge is sort of borderline as well. Edge is on the edge. But in this one, there are no plans in the foreseeable future to actually make any proposals to the core. I mean, theoretically, it's possible they could propose changes to job or something like that, but so far the focus has been integrating Kubernetes support into existing frameworks like Spark and Airflow.
And they don't need a SIG to propose changes to a job, right?
Yeah, and they don't need a SIG for that. So I'm in favor of just creating another category of groups because basically they just need to advertise their mailing list, their Slack channel, and their meeting time.
Yep. I think that actually concretely narrows the scope of working groups then too.
And the worst thing that could happen is like a bunch of people ask for these things and then it's...
Well, I think SIG Big Data hasn't been causing us any pain per se, so I actually think it would be a good thing to get more folks discussing, like cluster ops really should have been kind of in this category as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think the idea is that this just calls attention to these things because right now finding the Slack channel and mailing list can be challenging because there's like gazillions of Slack channels and stuff like that.
I think they're about 90 the last time I checked. Maybe they're probably more by now.
Aaron wants to say something.
Yeah, so the the other group of SIGs that beg the question of BOFs or user groups or support groups or whatever are the cloud provider SIGs. When we talk about how we want to fold everything under a single SIG called SIG Cloud Provider, there are concerns that users lose that like single point of contact for their cloud provider of choice.
I don't think they do though. Like we've been really effective in SIG cluster lifecycle that the sub-projects have leads and points and they have their own channels and it's just a sub-project and it works really well. So
they can even have their own meetings.
Yeah, they have their own meetings too.
Okay, so I agree with all of these viewpoints and share them. I feel like that message hasn't gotten across. I don't know. Sorry, I'm speaking with last year's context. I haven't really caught up to this year. I did see there's...
Yes,
like
that is the other big last open issue I'm aware of with respect to SIG's charters and working groups is the SIG cloud provider. A consolidation. Read that there seems to be resistance from some of the more established SIGs. The newer ones, I think, care less, but the SIG AWS in particular seem to have concerns.
I think one of the issues there is the spectrum of things that each cloud provider is doing something different. So the quicker we standardize, it's going to be better for everyone, I think. I'm fine with using the sub-projects and our SIG cloud provider, and we basically just tell them that you're all going to do the same thing.
Yeah, I think if we wait for everybody, we'll be waiting forever.
Right.
I think there needs to be like a time window expiration date where, come to the commons to express your concerns, and after some period of time, if there's no forceful thing that we can't resolve, then we just kind of collapse them. Because in reality, it doesn't really change anything that they're doing. They're still going to have the same meeting window times. We might change some Slack channel names over time, but it'd be very simple.
And I think we can structure the charter for SIG Cloud so that it actually gives the appropriate power down to the sub-project so that they feel like they can still do the things that they need to do. I think that was one of the concerns. There's a prestige aspect to it, but like, I'm just, that is
Get over it, right?
I agree. So I do think cloud provider is pushing forward. I saw a draft was sent to me. I don't know if it's public yet or not, but like this is the community doing this itself, which seems great. If we need to have oversight over whether it's not being done quickly enough or whatever, we can weigh in.
Well, there are logistical problems that we do want to have a choke point, right? Like documentation being one, right? So from an architectural perspective, we do want to have like, hey, SIG Cloud, you're responsible for, your sub-projects. Let's get some docs in order.
Yeah, I think another thing to realize is I'm going to pick SIG Azure as an example. They have two sub-projects. One's the cloud provider Azure. Cool, that obviously gets folded under a cloud provider. There's also cluster API provider Azure. So if you're telling me cluster API is lifecycle, okay, cool. So now there's one cloud provider that's got to have presence in two SIGs, and they've lost that unifying one place to go for all things Azure.
I think that's already true.
It's already true.
Well, and actually, honestly, that sounds awesome because people should be able to launch stuff on Azure without using the cloud provider, and they should be able to use the cloud provider without necessarily.
Well, also, I would say that I like this idea of sort of distinguishing between working group and support group. I feel like you should have an Azure Slack channel. That seems totally reasonable for people to discuss, but it's not the same as the people doing work in Azure support for cluster API or whatever. Right? So I think actually doing this with SIG Big Data as a first cut to say, hey, we really think this is actually more like a support group or birds of, I don't care what we call it. But establishing that new category actually then helps the cloud provider thing because we have done it once and we say, oh, and this is how we're doing it for all the cloud providers too.
Okay, sounds like violent agreement.
So quick interrupt there. So then we'll have three things in the cloud provider stuff. For each cloud provider, we'll have a support group, and then we have a set of developers working on the cloud provider and a set of developers working on the cluster provider, the cluster API.
Well, my suggestion is that the support group is totally independent, right? There's a separate Kubernetes community category called support groups or I like
user groups better, by the way.
User groups, that's fine. I don't care about the name. I'm just, and it's a totally separate category. And it's very easy to create one. And, really the only thing we try and do is maybe prevent overlap. So there isn't like SIG big data and SIG, or user group big data and user group large data and user group, moderate, I don't know what. But other than that, there's a very low barrier to entry to creating those, and those become the forums for user communication effectively.
Okay, so what's our action item out of this?
The action item would be to make sure that we have a single SIG cloud provider and all the others become sub-projects of this SIG cloud provider.
I guess I would take it a little bit more modular than that. I would say the two actions, one action is to write up what it means to be a user group. The other item is to turn SIG big data into one of these user groups. And once we're done with that, then I think we'll have established the precedent that we need to make cloud provider go.
Yes.
Okay, so, and I feel like writing up the idea of a user group or whatever and getting some socialization on that is going to be, you know, a bit of a project, just, you know, to get folks used to that. Does somebody want to sign up to do that?
I'll sign up.
Okay.
I'm going to call it support.
I'm happy to backstop you and review.
But I'm going to call it support groups, Joe. No, I'm kidding.
You do you. I mean, you know, that's what you get. But I'm, you know, the reason I'm not signing up is because I owe some chapters on the second edition of Kubernetes up and running. So
yeah, I'm just like twiddling my thumbs until you.
I know. I haven't forgotten, Brendan. SIG.
You have to type it. You have to type it on your not corp machine, so there isn't a V in front of every word.
It turns out that was a DNA injection. I can't help
Is
it.
that right? You can't help it. We
Yeah.
can call it Kubernetes up and running V next.
I know. All right. I'm just going to call you Brendan X. All right. All right. Thanks for taking that on, Brendan. And I'm happy to backstop you in review.
And just so we're clear, I'm thinking this is a markdown file in community. Is that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And I think at some point we may want to like have these things in SIG.YAML and generate as part of the other stuff, but can be separable from the socialization of it.
Do we have a doc that's already going to lay out, this is a SIG, this is a working group, and then this is a user group?
We have that. That's the governance doc. There is one of those.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll just add it to that.
Another one.
So yeah. So I assume it's either a new doc or adding to that doc.
Yep.
Is someone
We actually
posting-
have two docs called governance. It's great. That's probably the one you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was an open issue about that.
Okay.
Did we get that action item resolved?
We should write down that, at least inside of the issue.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And then, cool. Yeah, we added value.
So other than something that's not in the project board, I didn't have time to put it there yet, was we were asked to review the Code of Conduct Committee charter. So I don't think there's been a lot of feedback on that yet.
I did the first pass.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, do we want to, I mean, like we have a little bit of time here. We don't have a super full thing. Do we want everybody to take like 3 minutes and read it now and see if we can just knock that out?
We could do that.
Where is it?
I personally would like to defer that until we have Sarah involved. A number of the members of the Code of Conduct Committee are at an offsite.
Michelle and Sarah are not here.
Well, I assume they were involved in drafting it, so it gets their implicit approval.
I'll paste a link into the notes in just a second.
Oh, and there's a Michelle. A wild Michelle appears.
Hey, I just don't look at the time. Sorry about that.
Always. This was the Code of Conduct Charter. I was suggesting that, like, maybe we can all take 5 minutes and read it and see if we want to say yes now and skip some back and forth, but.
It's a little long, right?
It's 10 pages.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's more than 5 minutes. Okay.
I don't know about your reading skills.
So I think there's
It's going to take more than 2 pizzas for me to read.
I think there are things in that document that don't really need to be in the charter per se. And they have things about decision process, but also how the committee will actually function. So it may actually need to be split into at least 2 documents, one about the charter, the responsibilities of the committee, and one about the process.
So charter and bylaws type thing.
Yeah.
So we should take this as a homework activity, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I can make an entry. Actually, this document is not public, right? That's why I didn't make an entry in the project
Correct.
Yeah, it's not.
I can put a comment there without a link, though.
Do we want to keep running through the rest of the in progress column on the board, or are we just sort of going loose here?
We can work on, yeah, we can do the in progress. That's good. I do have one item that's not in the in progress that I want to follow up on, but let's do the in progress first.
Okay, I think I did as well. I can do the sharing of the screen for the thing if I can find a window. Okay. I think you're seeing the board. I'll try blowing it up a little bit if I can. Blocked, I don't even know if it's blocked or not. This is making sure all the repos have the same files. They may now. I'll check with Nikita afterwards. LTS, I don't think they're ready to bring their proposal to the steering committee. This does kind of beg the question that I realized I got the charter for the Kate's Infra working group merged, but I don't think I actually got a written vote from everybody. Did y'all see my email to the steering committee mailing list about that yesterday?
No.
Okay.
No.
So I emailed the steering committee mailing list yesterday. I bumped the thread where I first sent out the PR and said, hey, I think we should have a vote. And as far as I can tell, we've talked about it on a meeting, which I linked on that PR. And there were no objections other than the charter looking too SIG-like. So I updated it. The charter got merged. That's great. But I only have a video recording of no objections. I don't actually have a written vote. So I either need people to go drop LGTMs on that PR, or we could consider whether we want to try and adopt a policy of if it's a vote, then it should happen on the mailing list. And I should go call for a vote on the mailing list.
Didn't we do the lazy consensus thing anyways for all those things?
For working group, the way it's documented is it says I need LGTMs from a simple majority of the steering committee.
Yeah,
I was
so,
at a meeting that had 8 of 12, so I had simple majority.
yeah, so Tim Pepper is trying to chase people down for the LTS working group for that reason. And we should either clarify the existing process, you know, whether it should be LGTMs or mailing list or whatever, or we should change the document to relax the process.
Like I'm fine following it as written, and the process is like you gotta notify steering that you need LGTMs, and then you count how many steering members LGTM it, and then when you have that on the PR, you're good. But if that's the case, then my PR got merged too early, and could y'all please go drop LGTMs on it just for
I like
whatever that word is.
I think we should stick to the LGTMs on the PRs. It's just easier to follow and parse rather than go back and forth with the mailing one. And yes, I'll go and check that.
Yeah, just email needs to be sent to notify us of the existence of the PR because GitHub notifications are worthless.
Agree. Okay, so check your steering email. If you haven't lately, it should be there. I think we already talked about the charters meta issue. I don't know. I can go open it up. Like, I don't know how up to date it is.
Yes, we talked about that.
Okay. Document what working groups are and how to form and disband.
Holy cow, that's been around forever.
Okay, why is it still open? Let's go chase these two issues. One is we need to have a link, maybe? Okay, so apparently this PR needs to get merged. So maybe we can go chase through merging down this PR. Second thing.
Yes.
Second thing is update SIGs with more working group info. What we wanted to change here was to explicitly list the stakeholder SIGs in a working group. So if I go down here, a community member has actually taken a pass at enumerating all of the stakeholder SIGs for each of the different working groups with references to how they figured all of that out. And then Nikita has gone through and opened up a PR to actually implement this. So my question to you, the steering committee, is do you want to be involved in this, or do you feel like this is a SIG contributor experience concern?
I don't think it needs our approval.
Don't think it needs your approval?
No, it seems like it's just dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
Okay. Just making sure, since we're talking a lot about the definition of working groups in this meeting. All right. Formalizing sub-projects. Again and again, people ask for sub-projects to be these friendly things where they recognize they can have humans and human contact info in meetings, and that sub-projects are more than just a list of owners' files. I feel like cluster lifecycle is a great demonstration that they kind of work. But Tim, I know you've expressed concerns about making these a little bit friendlier. How do you?
Oh, it's just inside of the YAML file. That's a logistical thing. That's not a whether or not we should do that or what the constraints are. That's like, we need a meta field for being able to.
I guess we can add the meta field if that's the path of least resistance. My pushback has always been that we wanted to try and keep things dry, and so say that sub-projects are defined by the people in the owners files.
Yeah, the problem there is contact information. We need discovery. So if they want to go to a Slack channel, without the owners files, the owners files only give you partial information. So most of the time, people want to plunk down and find out where the mailing list is, where the Slack channel is for sub-projects.
So I'm happy to make sure that kind of meta information is available for sub-projects. But again, when it comes down to people, I'm concerned that if you had a field that's like chairs or organizers or whatever, and then separately there are owners files that have people's names in them, if those don't match, which is the one true source of the sub-project?
Oh, I'm fine about just owners files. That's totally fine with me. I don't particularly care.
Okay.
Right. I think the biggest issue, the issue that I comment on with the other pull request is that we need metadata for people to discover.
Okay. I think that's this issue right here. Brian, your hand is up.
Yeah, so the open issues that I'm aware of, the metadata is one. The issue with duplicating the information, way back at the beginning, we had discussed having owners files specify what sub-project they're part of. So there are a bunch of issues with the owner files. We have thousands and thousands of owners files, and we would like to deduplicate them and consolidate the information even within the owners files. So ideally, sub-projects would have a set of owners, approvers, and reviewers all in one place. Any other owner files that were needed would somehow refer to those, and we would have a tool that could automatically collate all of those owner file information and make sure it was in sync with YAML.
I widely agree with that, but I think that's conflating this particular problem. I'd like to do that as almost a separate issue.
Sure. Yes, it is a separate issue. I'm just saying they're still open.
I agree with that. We can make more progress on that if you can get more people to show up as staff to contributor experience and the GitHub management sub-project. My evil plan there is to redo the owners mechanism to use GitHub Teams instead of the owner's aliases file. That way, GitHub Teams are something we are working to automatically populate from files in a repo, so you know who's in the team, and those teams are accessible across the org. And then the owner's file can reference the team. We'll still have it dereference the team, so it actually calls out to specific people as opposed to assigning it to everybody so nobody responds. And that way, you have that one canonical location for the team name, but it's still tied to owner's files throughout the repo. It's taking us time to get there because it is volunteer staff between myself, Eric Feda, Christoph Blecker, and the other members of the GitHub management sub-project.
Should we post a role to the role board, see if we can get someone to volunteer to help more with GitHub management? I feel like we have a bunch of those issues right now.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the other thing, I don't think we have labels for sub-projects yet. We only have SIG labels.
We don't. What I have organically been doing is starting to add area labels to the repos that I want. My concern is if we add a label for every single sub-project that we have, we may end up with like a couple hundred labels spread across every single repo in the org. That probably doesn't make sense. So I've been trying to be a little more diligent and say, for example, the area conformance label only applies to Kubernetes, test infra, and community, since those are the three repos where changes related to conformance land.
Well, I was thinking sub-project labels could replace the area labels.
That's totally fine. So these are all things that I could enumerate for contributor experience to own, and then get them to put out, put help wanted or send something out to a roll board and see if somebody picks that up. But my bandwidth is not as great as it used to be. If somebody wants to help with that.
Okay.
Okay. Cleanup audit of working groups. I believe this is our idea that there's some working groups that shouldn't be working groups. Did we already talk about that? And are we going to shuffle them in that direction based on the BOF stuff?
Yes, we talked about that.
Okay. Kubernetes license scanning. I got SIG release to create this, SIG release is talking about making this an official sub-project for them. I know that Stephen has talked about it, but Stephen's going to be kind of AFK for the next half of the month. Is there something that urgently needs to be addressed within the next half of the month?
Hi. I've been pinging Stephen to at least do one run of the KK repository to see where we are. And he promised to try to do it this week. I haven't heard back from him. I'll ping him later.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I believe he does have that access because I got him to run a FOSSA report on one of the repos he was trying to donate to the project.
Okay.
Okay, there were some questions from people in contributor experience that it seems weird that the values for the project live off in the steering repo instead of in the community repo where we have all of the other helpful info about the project. And so they were proposing that they remove the values file from the steering repo and move it into the root of the community repo. I am by and large in favor of this because I think the community repo probably has more traffic and visibility than the steering repo. The implications are, though, that the set of people who can approve changes to that values file grows beyond just the steering committee. Do we have a problem with that?
That can be addressed with owners files, right?
It could, except if we put it at the root of the repo, the set of people who have root owners privileges to the community repo is more than the steering committee.
I guess
we have source control.
Yeah, exactly. Like we have source control. Why are we worried?
Okay.
But we can also, I mean, I agree, source control, let's just lean on that. But also we could put it in the steering directory under the community repo and then just reference it.
But you can have per file owners. So in owners, we could specify that steering as reviewers or approvers for that file.
Mm-hmm.
And in theory, someone else could approve it, but we would see it, presumably.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think there's a bug that's such that we can't have per file owners with the way owners are implemented. If you're talking about the fact that we use owners files can now support regular expressions to filter what their other fields apply to. Regular expressions and the approvers field don't play very well together. We have an issue open about that in test infra. It works well enough for the case of like covering API files to make sure that only API reviewers can hit those, but it doesn't work terribly well for this kind of case. The only other way that it's worked in the past is by reading YAML metadata out of the headers of markdown files.
Okay, in any case, I'm not super worried, but if we are worried, let's just put it under steering directory.
I'm not worried. It doesn't sound like anybody's worried.
I'm not worried either.
Okay. That is everything that's in progress. I don't feel a strong need to go through the backlog, but I kind of want to check back and see if people had stuff in the agenda.
I had something that I didn't get around to putting in the agenda. But I, again, want to figure out how we can open up this meeting and in general make the steering committee more accessible, because there's no good way for people to bring business to us. Like in the case of getting a working group approved, the best they can do is email the steering mailing list. So it's still the case that some people go to SIG architecture just because they're hoping to find someone who's on the steering committee. because they're open meetings, and it also just makes it hard for us to engage other people to help us do work. Watching a recording of the meeting and then following up by email is really not the same. So I'd really like to think about having office hours or alternating public and private meetings, or having a public part of this meeting or something. Otherwise, it's going to be hard for us to mentor the next generation of leaders, for example, as well as to offload and share more of the work and delegate the work. Like if the election this fall, the ideal case would be people would get elected that were already doing work for the steering committee, but that's just really hard for us to get people involved. Unless it's Aaron going to contributor experience for those specific areas, or Michelle working with the Code of Conduct Committee. It's all kind of one by one. So I like to think about how we can change that. I don't think there's any particularly great reason for most of these meetings to be private. The CNCF TOC has mostly public meetings. We're discussing having alternating public and private just so we can have more of working meetings. But
with Zoom, it depends upon how we want to structure this. If you want it to be so wide open that it becomes a problem, right? Because some people might want to come here just to come here, or you might have like a limited audience who can sometimes denial a service attack. Certain members of different SIGs sometimes do that. So we could control the venue by having like a Q&A section where we could discuss topics or somehow unmute participants, but I don't know how we want to structure the forum for involving the broader community.
Yeah, we had talked about using, sorry, Michelle, we talked about using the Meet the Contributors sessions run by Paris, but that hasn't really been working to have any meaningful discussion or follow-up. Michelle?
I think we should just like make our next meeting public and just go like business as usual and just see how it goes. Because I just wonder, I don't know what to expect. So I wonder what's going to happen. Then we can kind of take that and process it.
Another thought is whether we would want to increase the cadence of these meetings. So there's a bi-weekly private and a bi-weekly public.
Okay, so
And
like
if there's no agenda item in the biweekly public, you can punt.
oh, that's a really
Well, I mean, is the biweekly public for the public, or is it just us doing our thing in public?
I'm thinking, if we want to get more people engaged on some of these issues, it would be helpful for them to be present when we discuss it, so we can give action items directly and allow a forum for them to ask questions. Or if there are things that require our attention that are not getting attention through electronic means, that people will have a way to follow up in person just to poke us and say, hey, nobody responded to this email or this pull request or this Slack message or whatever.
I mean, what's the worst that could happen?
I don't know, but I'd be really excited.
You asked that question out loud, for real?
I mean, it's worth an experiment, I'm kind of thinking.
Yeah, I think we should go with what Michelle said. Open it, and Brian said, open it up to public, and if necessary, we can schedule separate private meetings of steering if needed.
Yeah, we've already effectively done this like with recording, right? Turning recording on and off. So like, it feels the same.
Well, I think, so in my mind, what's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is that somebody comes in and not maliciously, but they end up dominating the conversation such that we can't get business done and we can't actually cover the topics that we think we need to cover.
Make me bosun and I will lay down the law.
Well, somebody being the moderator of the meeting.
I was going to say, I would appreciate maybe Phil or Brian if you could tap Paris, just unless anybody here has a ton of experience being super tight on the moderation abilities available to us, because I know SIG Apps has had to deal with the problems that Tim has mentioned. But I just feel like having somebody who knows all the tools available at our disposal would make me feel.
I would feel very comfortable if Paris moderated if she was up for it.
What prevents other people from joining this meeting right now?
private calendar invite.
They just don't have the Zoom link?
Correct.
Yeah.
So you can set the meeting up so that you can dump people into a lobby and then have somebody add them from the lobby. And you can also, I believe there are settings to like prevent people from speaking, but I forget.
And in terms of pairs, I don't know if we need to have pairs be the one moderating versus making sure we have the meeting set up in the right way. So that
Right, yeah, I'm using Paris as proxy for the people who know all about moderation from contributor experience. I just know she helped write a lot of that guide.
The other thing we could do is make the agenda open and just add people who have agenda items.
I would personally, that seems cooler to me, but I'm totally fine just being loose, opening it up, seeing what happens.
Yeah, I'd like to go through the project board because, you know, this is like, I think a lot of us believe in servant leadership. So I want to be able to tell people like, hey, this is what we're working on, and use this meeting, or at least the first half of the meeting, to explain yourselves. Be like, yeah, we're doing stuff, or we didn't do this stuff, and go through the in progress column like you just did, Aaron. And then setting the second half as like open, and you know, people can bring things up. And if they're not appropriate for this venue, then I think we should just let them know that it's not appropriate for this venue right now.
all right.
Okay. I'll reach out to Paris.
Yeah, and we'll probably want a separate set of like if we want to do like an every other week type of thing. I don't know. Then we probably need a separate series of meetings and all that.
Well, we could announce the open agenda and then see how much demand there is for agenda items.
Well, I think there's two overlapping topics. So one of these is open agenda, where people can actually post agendas and actually bring business to us. The second thing is having people audit and then use that as a way to drive some engagement and ways to actually have people take stuff on, even if they don't have agenda items, right? So like, I think we could drive involvement of a wider set of people as one goal, and then having a forum for people to bring up new topics as a separate goal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Can we also do it this meeting every week instead of every other week? Because most of the time what we end up doing is like just before the meeting we go do all the steering stuff, right? So
why don't we, I mean, like I'll propose, did somebody else want to talk? I'm sorry, am I stepping on somebody? No.
Oh, you're fine. I was just going to tell Tim's, don't reveal our secrets. Jeez.
No, I think like one of the things we could try is we could take the off weeks of what we're on right now, and we could actually have it be sort of an open steering committee. Like, you know, if people have business to bring, have them bring that business. If they don't, we go through the other thing, and then everybody's free to audit it if they want to, and we can give that a try and see how things go. And, you know, my guess is it won't get out of control and it'll be fine.
Would it make sense to have working meetings? Like, there's a lot of us here. There's a lot of people to get like work done.
Well, we were going to do that with the Code of Conduct Charter, but decided it would take too much time. But yeah, I mean, if there are easy things we can do, if we can bring up an issue and resolve it in like 1 minute, we should definitely just do that.
I did LGTM that charter though.
There you go.
Boom.
It works.
So just to close out the opening the steering committee meeting, Brian's going to talk to Paris about moderating. Who's going to like notify people? When's the next one that we're going to do open?
I'll see if I can get feedback from Paris and then email you all with what the TLDR from that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to if you want to pull me in on that, Brian, like since I have the invite, I've been doing the transfer to video, keeping that process going because.
Okay.
Let's follow up on the mailing list if we have to, without having to wait till the next meeting.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So are you using your Heptio email for the indefinite future, Joe?
I have to switch everything over to my VMware email. But VMware uses Zoom, so I have an account through that also. So there's that.
I had two other things. It's cool. I'll get the first one, just a meta point where like we took some notes during our discussion of last week, and then, during our discussion, group therapy, face-to-face, whatever you want to call it after KubeCon. Michelle and I had an action item to follow up and take notes. I completely fell down on that. Michelle has done a good chunk of note-taking, though I don't know if we actually finished, and I certainly don't feel like we got to a point where we can distill action items out of it.
Yeah, I think I had like maybe less than 30 minutes left on the recording. That meeting was hilarious, and let's never record a meeting again.
Yes.
So, when was this? Did I miss this one? Was this like the third or whatever?
Yeah, this was our face-to-face where like I stood up and revealed after the fact that I had been recording it because passionate.
Yeah.
So
the fact that we're talking about this right now in public is scary.
Oh no. Well, you used the R word, but so just like there's a private doc where we're taking some notes because there was a lot of thoughtful discussion, some of it more colorful than other parts of it, and we'll come back with some action items, but TBD on that if y'all are cool with that. You'll know when we're done, so to speak. Okay, the other thing that was sort of brought up during yesterday's SIG release meeting is the product security team has all of their docs inside of the SIG release repo, but I don't think they're a sub-project of SIG release. So we were talking about, hey, what's the formal governance structure for the product security team? Do we call it committee? Seems like the closest word for it if you view committee as an entity that has sort of a rotating staff and can have public and private meetings and stuff like that. Brandon, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that I intended to do it. I don't ever remember if we ever documented what a committee is.
I kind of feel like we haven't, is the thing. The committee is the catch-all for its special.
I think we had a Foursquare thing at one point, right? Yeah, in that governance.md, there's a definition of committees.
Oh my God, it is there.
And we said some topics as security or code of conduct require discretion, whereas SIGs are voluntary groups that operate in the open. Anyone can join committees, do not have open membership, and do not always operate in the open. The steering committee can form committees as needed for bounded or unbounded duration. Membership of a committee is decided by the steering committee. Like a SIG committee has a charter and a chair and will report to the steering committee periodically and to the community as it makes sense given the charter.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put up an issue and then you guys can it.
Look at us.
Look, yeah. This is like the most productive steering committee meeting we've ever had.
Wow, everyone.
Great job. New year, new committee. I love it.
Yeah, I think that security was definitely one of the things that we had in mind when we defined committee, so it's in there.
Yeah, I just forgot there was a process, so that's great. Although also we're missing a link to the KEP process in this doc that was just linked. It's on the very last. Ha! Good work.
Just a fun fact on KEPs, not that I think we have any say in it, but I've been going around being a bull in a china shop with KEPs. I've talked to a bunch of SIGs with my desire to have everything that lands in the release have a KEP associated with it. SIG PM is kind of coming back to life and a bunch of people want to help out. I am suggesting that SIG PM be the stewards of the process and that SIG architecture be the stewards of the decision making involved in KEPs. It's kind of the same people who bounce back and forth between these right now in terms of ownership of this. I feel like SIG architecture is the more proper forum to talk about that. We have strong opinions.
Well, and SIG architecture definitely has opinions about what the KEP content should be.
Yeah. I think SIG architecture has opinions about everything.
We do, but in particular, I think I care more about the content to make sure the right questions are asked. You know, like we were talking about, how do we raise the quality bar and make clear the testing requirements, the documentation requirements, the monitoring requirements, or whatever, and how that relates to the API review process and what parts of the API should be in the KEP versus done separately and stuff like that. So, you know, there are definitely details relevant to SIG architecture, but in terms of the overall process, I think getting some project management help from SIG PM would be nice.
Okay.
Something we used to do back when the project was much smaller is actually be more explicit about the project's capacity for change. And I think it would be helpful to go back to that to say, no, this is a good idea, but we can't do it right now because we have too many other things going on. I think would help. I just started looking through, I just triaged my email from September, and that's how I am. And I found things that were stalled since July. You know, so it's just super hard to keep track of everything that's going on now.
So this sounds like a great discussion. Is this a steering committee discussion?
It's not. I was just giving a heads up because I think, like Brian said, there are a lot of SIGs that this cuts across. So y'all attend a bunch of different SIGs, and we'd love all of your input. But the focal point, the concern I have is SIG release, SIG architecture, SIG PM all have opinions. And so if I'm being a bull in a china shop and trying to push some stuff forward and change some things, I'm going to have to involve all three of them. I'd really love to reduce that down to one.
I think that, you know, for cross SIG coordination, we can't use the steering committee as sort of the veto thing here. So I think,
yeah, I'm not looking for veto or anything.
I know you're not, but I think it's just like, say, hey, I want to reduce that to one. I can talk to the steering committee. Boom. I don't have to actually, like,
I think we don't use the SIG leads email enough.
Yeah.
That's almost nothing amongst SIG leads and chairs. So maybe we try to use that form.
Sure. I will give a heads up out there.
I think, you know, I'd like to believe that a concrete plan sent to the mailing list across those things that's reasonable could move pretty fast, but maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah, Joe, last time I sent something, people said they don't read that mailing list, so.
Well, boom.
There's a whole thread about that I found in my old email too.
Okay. Okay, so I added a couple of things to links to the doc. There's a security audit. There was a sanitized version of the proposal. I don't know how many people have seen it. Then the other one was CNCF maintainers mailing list. There was a link to a report, Kubernetes media and velocity. Please take a look at those two things. See, maybe there's some stuff that we'll probably have to do.
So one interesting thing, I took a glance at the median velocity report, is they have information about social media activity and press activity for each Kubernetes release. So that might be something to pay attention to about how that's changing over time. You know, we've been talking about Kubernetes getting boring. I think that is messages being received, and that there seems to be less reaction to some of the recent Kubernetes releases. So we might want to think about whether that's a good thing or not a good thing. I don't know, haven't decided. 112 is interesting. There was less interest in 112. And when I read the 112 release notes, I thought, yeah, this doesn't seem very exciting, but I think also the work that was done in 112 wasn't communicated very well through the release notes. So yeah, I don't know what to take away from that. Maybe help more with articulating what's going on in the release, or provide better guidance to people about what to highlight in the release notes.
So I wanted to add to that, like on Cube being boring. I had a couple of people comment to me that the new KEP process is so much BS and extra work that they just don't want to add features. And for a second, I was like, it kind of sounds like what we intended in a way, but
Clayton's looking at me, and it wasn't me.
Yeah, it wasn't.
It might have been me.
It wasn't Derek. Trust me. But it was the perception from some community members, like that there's a slower process, was not something that I'd heard people reflect back. So along the lines of what Brian said.
Yeah, and Aaron is going around bashing people up for not filing KEPs too.
Trying to. Just back to Joe's point about like communicating a clear process. My problem is I don't have a clear, crisp process. I still feel like we're at a point where we're iterating through this. So it's going to be a little bit bumpy.
Yeah, I think it's fine. There's still a bunch of open design proposals in the community repo, like following the pre-KEP process, such as it is.
So Clayton, with respect to the, if you're getting pushback on the KEP process, I think it's worth saying, what is the experience for folks who know how to like reach out to Clayton and get an approval versus what is the experience for folks who, don't have, first order access?
And it was more, the comments that I was getting were more from people who've worked on the project for a while and kind of know, like, who are, in some cases, were people who were involved in SIGs. And so this is that, it's like what about the people who work on SIGs day to day? It's kind of just like, we've always said that we should do proposals. So some of it is just a little bit like.
It depends on the SIG. Everything in SIG cluster lifecycle, we've been doing this already. So like we have KEPs for KEPs right now. We have quite a few. So like.
API machinery was also very navel gazing on proposals. It just never surfaced up out. But like, just some of this is like, I think some of it is perceived as a difference, even though in practice for anybody who's in a SIG who's been working on the project a while, like it shouldn't be a surprise for most people. It's just more of the like, oh, I have to go talk to these other SIGs or I have to go do process versus getting alignment. So it's having the effect I think we intend.
Well, I think, and I hope that like, if it doesn't cross SIG boundaries, then it's how, it's kind of like,
And it's interesting because there's definitely KEPs that happen in a SIG boundary that we want to talk about at a larger level. And SIGARC has picked up some of that, like, people being more willing to talk to SIGARC. But I think some of the
I'm going to ask a point on that one. So
can you guys hear Derek?
Oh, we got the open, we're already doing the open steering committee meeting. How's it going?
If you, Joe, on your point, if it doesn't cross SIG boundaries, so I mean, my understanding was that we're asking every enhancement, no matter if it crosses SIG boundary or not, to be captured with a KEP. Yeah.
So I think that's one of those things that I think is in flight a little bit. But I think some of it is that like, should it be written down so it can be communicated is one thing. And does the approval process for that KEP actually reach outside the SIG, right? And I think that like, if it doesn't cross SIG boundaries, then like we may, and I think this is the stuff that Aaron's pounding the table on, we may want to say, okay, you have to at least write some stuff down, right? Yeah. So that other people can see it.
I guess the pushback I've also heard is that if it doesn't cross the SIG boundary, I've already written it down in the PR. I'm just doing more paperwork that I have to approve to then approve the PR. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Just that is the feedback that I guess we've gotten from those who've been on the project a long time.
So, and what I would say is that if your only documentation is the PR, that's probably not a good thing.
Yeah.
It is
the time and topic.
Yeah, this is totally not germane to steering. This is like totally an arch conversation. So I think we should probably
slowing down the project so that it feels more stable was a goal we had talked about. It seems to be having an effect.
Yeah, and I would say it's also challenging the. Subject for steering. I struggle with this a little bit because, as Brian said, like if we don't get people wanting to participate or we put too many barriers up, then we'll continue to have the symptom that Brian talked about to some degree. And I guess it's for all of us to decide if that's a good or a bad thing. But thus far, I think it's worth knowing like the feedback at least we've gotten. Maybe you guys get others.
So do we talk about this tomorrow in SIG architecture?
Yeah, we can put it on the agenda.
I'll be there because I want to try and suggest that the discussions about the experience of it and the friction of it are best fostered by SIG PM to make the experience, but like making sure the right information shows up in there is what SIG architecture kind of cares about. But I agree. We can totally talk about it there. This is where we're at time, actually.
Okay, I have to go. Thanks.
Happy 2019, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Let's go, Spark Joy.